कहाँ रहते हो नितिन?
सर मैं रहता हूँ यमुना विहार के पास।
दूर है, बाइक से आते हो?
हाँ।
तुम निकल जाते हो ठंड ठंड के मारे जान निकल जाती हो?
नहीं, पैक होके जाते सर, मगर ठंड तो फिर भी लगती है, चाहे कैसे ही कर लो, गाड़ी में जाओ कर लो। 1 मिनट।
Good morning. Cost centers. A responsibility center wherein the manager is responsible for cost control can be termed as a cost center or an expense center. There are two types of cost centers which are given below. Number one, the engineered expense centers or standard cost centers. Number two, discretionary. Generally, in engineered cost, standards can be set because the input is usually relatable to the output. Based on these standards or benchmarking, they can be termed standard cost. Types of cost centers. Relation between inputs and outputs. The goal of management is to obtain the optimum relationship between inputs and outputs. In some situations, the relationship is casual. For example, in the production department. But in many situations, it is not so. Advertising expense is an output which is expected to increase sales revenue. But the latter is affected by many factors other than advertising. As such, there is no direct relationship in this advertising expense. Basically, how much money should be spent on advertising is a matter of judgment. For research and development, the relationship is even more ambiguous. The value of research and development efforts may not be known for several years. And the optimum amount that a company should spend for research and development is indeterminable and again depends on management's judgment. Measuring inputs and outputs. The resources consumed in an responsibility center are translated into monetary terms, as the latter provides the common denominator. The resources used multiplied by the price per unit paid is called cost, which is the monetary measure of the amount of resources used by a responsibility center. Please note that inputs are the resources used. The patients in a hospital or the school are not inputs. Inputs are resources used in treating the patients and educating the students. Treatment of the patients and education of students are objectives of the two organizations respectively. Not so in the case of outputs. Oriented organization, revenue is an important measure of output of the whole organization. However, period may not truly reflect all the efforts made in that year. For example, the value of the money spent on research and development, employee training, or advertisement and sales promotion carried out on a particular year may not be fully realized in that year, but also in the subsequent years. Besides, outputs in many responsibility centers cannot be measured satisfactorily. For example, public relations department, quality control department, or legal department. In many non-profit organizations, a satisfactory measure of output may not exist. Efficiency and effectiveness. The responsibility centers may be judged in terms of the criteria of efficiency and effectiveness, which are used in comparative rather than absolute sense. Efficiency is the ratio of outputs to inputs. Organizational unit, say A, is supposed to be more efficient than another unit, say B, if number one, it uses lesser resources than unit B but has the same output, or number two, it uses the same amount of resources as unit B but has greater output than unit B. In many responsibility centers, a measure of efficiency can be developed that relates actual cost to some standard. That is, what cost should be incurred for the amount of measured output, which can be a useful indication of efficiency. The different types of cost center in an organization are listed below. Personal cost center. Some cost centers are maintained for a particular person or a group of persons to capture the cost and monitor, such as the finance manager, HR manager, etc. Impersonal cost center. Here it deals with other than persons, such as equipment, machinery, or locations. Example, South India Sales Region, Research and Development Unit, etc. Production Cost Center. Departments or units which directly relate to the production are classified thus. Example, Tools Department, Grinding Unit of Production Line, etc. Service Cost Center. The support services to the main business line are termed as a service cost center. For example, the procurement department, finance department, etc. These service centers also provide service to the whole organization, or rather to all the departments in the organization. Operation cost center. This cost relates to either person or machinery captured in a particular unit. For example, operational cost in an IT organization include the salary of people in that account and the cost of laptops for the team members. Process cost center. This cost is captured for a particular process in an industry. For example, the cost of making rolling, the steel in the rolling mills is the process cost of rolling wire rods. Engineered cost centers. An engineered cost is defined as one where there is a close causal relationship, which may be treated as physical relationship between the quantity of output and the amount of cost or expense, that is the input, and hence The right or proper amount of cost that should be incurred can be estimated with a reasonable degree of reliability. It is fairly easy to estimate the input-output relationship by engineering means. The raw material and input required to produce a part output is a good example. Once the production method is decided, the engineers are able to estimate the quantity of raw material required to produce one unit of product by the prescribed method by analyzing the nature of the production process or by the test runs. Any significant variations in the amount of raw material used per unit of output are not expected unless there are inefficiencies, changes in production methods, or changes in the quality of materials or labor used. Some other examples are components, supplies, and utilities. In short, engineered cost centers have the following characteristics. Their inputs can be measured in monetary terms. Their outputs can be measured in physical terms. The optimal amounts of inputs required to produce one unit of output can be established. Managed cost centers. Discretionary cost is a capital expenditure that can be avoided in the near term without having an impact on the short-term profit of the organization. Advertising, building, and machinery are some examples of discretionary cost. The discretionary expense can be explained with the help of following two important features. Based on yearly review, they arrive at the maximum outlay to be incurred for a particular activity. These costs can generally be controlled and need not be essential cost. They are not tied to a clear cause and effect relationship between inputs and outputs. Measuring the performance of engineered expense center or standard cost centers. Standard costs are costs that are predetermined by the management based on experience. That we incur these costs for this level of production or output. They are set as targets to be met, and after the activity is carried out, the actual cost incurred is compared with this target. They are the predetermined cost based on the estimates for materials, labor, and overheads for a particular period. One of the most important uses of standard costing is to compare the actual cost with the standard cost and analyze the regions of variation with the view of maximizing the efficiency. Variation is the difference between standard cost and actual cost. This is the actual comparison of actual cost incurred with standard cost. Typical cost control tool in a production department. General types of variances can be calculated for cost item. They are basically price variance and quantity variance. Quantity variance can further be subdivided in the efficiency variance and etc. But basically they are of two types. Price variance is calculated as price variance equal to actual quantity into actual price minus standard price. Or you may say price variance equal to AQ into AP minus SP. If we expand this formula, price variance equal to AQ into AP minus AQ into SP. Second one, quantity variance is calculated as standard price into actual quantity minus standard quantity. And when we expand this formula, standard price in minus standard price into standard quantity. Of discretionary cost center. In regard to discretionary cost center, there are some general considerations which need to be kept in view in designing the control systems. Discretionary cost center mainly relates to the non-essential cost that can be controlled by a manager. For example, the travel and hotel costs incurred by the sales team. If the sales team manager is not vigilant, these costs will be huge compared to the order they have backed. Hence, in such situations, there are budgets set aside for these costs and closely monitored periodically, say monthly, to ensure that the costs do not exceed the budget. Budget preparation. While the budget in regard to engineer cost centers depend upon the task to be performed, which in turn depends on the other responsibility centers. The budget for a discretionary cost center depends upon the magnitude of the job that the management wants to perform. In addition to the continuing task, the management may assign a discretionary cost center one or more special tasks during a budget period. In preparing the budget for such a center, a technique called MBO, management by objectives, can be highly useful in appraising its performance. Management by objective. MBO is the formal process wherein the management plans their activities, goals for the current financial year with the help of a budgeting tool. MBO is a formal process in which a department proposes to accomplish specific jobs along with the cost, material, and time estimates required to complete the said activity. These goals are termed budgeted variables or estimates which serve as a benchmark to compare with actuals on completion of the activity. The budget is also viewed as a planning tool to achieve the organization's goals. The planning function for the discretionary expense center, however, has a slightly different budgeting tool, incremental budgeting and zero-based review or zero-based budgeting. Incremental budgeting. In this model, there needs to be a starting point or base from where the budget is planned. Usually, the discretionary expense center lists down the current expenses, which serve as the baseline. This amount is adjusted for inflation, anticipated changes in the workload of continuing jobs, special job requirements, and the cost of comparable jobs in similar units. This model has two drawbacks. Firstly, The center's current level of expenditure is taken as the base or benchmark without examining for any possible reduction in expenses. Number two, there are no provisions or adjustments incorporated for an increase in activity level. So any change or increase in activities will create a shortfall in the budget. Despite these limitations, most organizations follow incremental budgeting for their discretionary expense centers. Second one, zero-based review or zero-based budget. In this method, a thorough analysis is done of each discretionary measure, expense centers, or a rolling schedule so that all are reviewed at least once every 5 years. This is called zero base review, wherein there is no base or the base is taken as zero. In contrast with incremental budgeting, this method considers each activity as a new one, irrespective of whether has been carried out before this, and lists down all the estimates to complete the activity within a specific period. Balanced scorecard. The balanced scorecard is a performance measuring tool that implies a strategy map to link an organization's day-to-day operations to its overall objective. It is concerned with developing a strategy to guide future direction, incorporating cause and effect relationship, while also considering both financial and intangible resources that might decide success or failure. The balanced scorecard, while retaining traditional financial measures, focuses on creating future value by investing in customers, suppliers, employees, processes, technology, and innovation. Activity-based costing, ABC. Traditionally, activity-based costing is calculated based on assigning the material cost incurred and cost of direct labor to the product. But with the latest development in technologies, companies have a limited need for labor. For example, in 1990s, mobile handset assembling are done manually, but now this has been replaced with robotic arms in many companies, making direct labor cost redundant. As discussed, the markups on the direct labor and material costs are assigned to the product. Then the calculation of activity-based costing is made entirely on the process of production. In other words, in each process, actual activity in producing the number of volumes is considered. Some special discretionary cost centers, administrative and support service departments. Administrative services include senior corporate management, business unit management, and managers who are responsible for their staff units. Support services include units that provide services to the other responsibility centers. The control of administrative and support services is especially difficult because measuring output of such units is almost impossible. And there are chances of dysfunctionality taking place because of lack of goal congruence. Research and Development Department. The control of R&D department, a discretionary cost center, is difficult for the following reasons. Number one, it is difficult to measure results quantitatively, though, unlike administrative and support departments, research and development units have at least semi tangible output in the form of patents, new products, new processes, etc. Nevertheless, it is difficult to measure and appraise the relationship of these outputs to inputs. Even if the value of the output can be calculated, it is usually not possible for management to evaluate the efficiency of research and development effort because of its technical nature. And number two, the dysfunctionality problem is similar to administrative and support units. The resource managers typically want to build the best research organization that money can buy. But for the company, it may be difficult to afford such expenses. The research and development can seldom be controlled effectively on an annual basis. A research project may take years to reach fruition, and the organization must be built slowly over a period of time. When research and development budget is linked to sales revenue or profits based on a certain percentage, the allocated amount fluctuates year after year, which may not be a healthy thing for the organization. Research and development should be seen as a long-term investment, and hence the budget amount as far as possible should be stable over time. Marketing department. A marketing organization has three types of activities, and consequently, three types of activity measures may be used. First, there is the amount of revenue that the marketing activity generates. This is usually measured by comparing actual revenue with budgeted revenue and comparing physical quantities sold with budgeting units. Second, there is the order filling, logistics or distribution, transportation included activity. Such costs also include warehousing, shipping, delivery, billing and the related credit function, and collection of accounts receivable. Many of the costs incurred in these activities are engineered costs, and the actual cost can be measured against standard or flexibly budgeted cost. Third, there are order generating costs. Such costs take place before receiving the orders, contrary to the order filling cost, which take place after the orders have been received, which are discretionary and the optimum amount cannot be known. Consequently, the measurement of efficiency and effectiveness for these costs is highly subjective. Controllable versus non-controllable cost. Cost can be divided into controllable and uncontrollable cost. Standard cost centers are usually responsible for the controllable cost in the responsibility centers. Controllable costs are that may be monitored or regulated over a specific period by establishing adequate processes and personal responsibilities. For example, if the production supervisor is responsible to hire labor daily, then labor cost is said to be controllable by the supervisor. Non-controllable or uncontrollable costs are the costs which are not or cannot be regulated by the manager, irrespective of his authoritative position. Suppose the factory is operating out of rented premises and management decides the place out of which factories operate, and the factory head has no authority in that decision, then factory rent will be an uncontrollable cost as far as the factory head is concerned. It must be remembered that every cost that is uncontrollable at some level is controllable at a higher management level. So for the business as a whole, no cost will be classified as uncontrollable for responsibility accounting. Now, the second part of today, counseling profit centers. Profit center is a responsible statutory body that oversees the management of profit centers. It is even more useful since it is one comprehensive measure that dispenses with the need to use several measures. For example, profit margin, assets turnover, etc. Profit is the most widely used measure of performance for a business firm, and hence, therefore, not surprising that profit centers are popular among large decentralized organizations. Profit center autonomy. The managerial style consists of several personal variables that influence the behavior of corporate management. These variables include: number one, the desire of the corporate managers to be involved in the details of the business of units and their day to day interaction with profit center managers. And number two, the level of trust and confidence the corporate management has in the ability and experience of managers. The responsibility structure, politics, and procedure that the corporate management has laid down usually affects the custody of resources. They may be physical, material, human, finance, etc. That is what resources and to what extent the profit center managers will have them. The measurement and reward system are largely affected by the responsibility structure. All the variables that we have just discussed produce an ultimate effect known as autonomy of the profit center manager. Though the immediate ones are the responsibility structure and the policies and procedures and the degree of custody of resources. Diversification and decentralization. Autonomy is coextensive with the strategy of diversification. That is, more the enterprise diversified, more the autonomy its units tend to have. Diversification tends to bring about the establishment of almost autonomous or semi-autonomous, they are usually called business units or divisions, which have within them both the major functions of manufacturing and marketing. That is, the responsible managers or heads of the divisions take decisions with respect to manufacturing and marketing operations, and hence can be held responsible for generating certain level of profits or targeted agreed profits. One of the purposes of decentralization is the economic efficiency, which means utilization of resources to achieve maximum possible benefits. If a segment is to be economically efficient, it should follow the same patterns of behavior that are found in independent entities competing against each other. When profit responsibility, which otherwise exists at the corporate or highest level, percolates down to the business unit or divisional level, the process is known as profit decentralization. The responsible managers of the business units or divisions take upon themselves the responsibility of contributing profits to the overall collective profits of the organization. The responsibility profit is spread across our divisions and is not just concentrated at the apex or top level. As a natural consequence, diversification leads to what is called divisionalization, which in turn facilitates profit decentralization and the establishment of profit centers. The divisions, or better known as product divisions, are more or less independent business units. It happens because they are in different industries and there is very little interdependence between them. Benefits and limitation of decentralization. Benefits of profit decentralization. Better understanding about firm's ultimate objectives. Because the power has been decentralized, every person or at least every department is responsible for taking the decisions, and therefore there is better understanding about firm's ultimate objectives. Better profit planning, the same thing. As they have to plan a better planning so that the profits may increase. Better morale and motivation. When a person is made in charge, when a person is made responsible, when the person is given benefits on the objectives achieved, there is better morale and better motivation. Better quality of managerial decisions. When the decisions are taken by the person who is actually performing the duties, then the quality of decisions is better. More attention by corporate management on strategic aspects. When middle level or lower level decisions have been decentralized, then the corporate management can give attention to the strategic aspects of the department, of the concern as a whole. Training for developing a cadre of general managers. The managers who have been given the power to decide, in long run, they will become good managers, better managers to take better decisions for the corporate. Encouraging a spirit of competition between the different profit centers. Difficulties with and limitations of decentralization. Costly form of organizations. because the decisions are taken at various levels and cost is involved in that, and therefore it is costly form of organization. Necessary restraint difficult. Frictions and dysfunctionality. As the competition is there are frictions between the various departments. Bickering on transfer prices. When one product is transferred from one department to another, the department which is transferring the product wants to get the best possible prices. The higher the prices, there will be more profit in that department. And the transferring department is interested in the lower prices. Difficulties arising from the common cost, say the cost of administrative department, etc. How or on what basis they should be divided, there is difficulty in this. And unhealthy competition, making success of decentralization. Minimum interdependence. Interdependence means there will be problem. There will be problem of division of cost. There will be problem of transfer pricing. Therefore, there should be minimum interdependence. Minimum direct competition in outside market. There should be operational autonomy, means the profit center is permitted to take decision as much as it can. Rational transfer pricing system. This transfer pricing we will be discussing in the next counseling in detail. Non-interference policy and emphasis on long-term profitability. Establishing profit centers. Profit centers are established as a result of the decision of the top management. That is, profit centers come into being because the top management thinks that it would be a good idea to designate all or some units of the organization as profit centers. And hence, it creates such entities. However, the manager must have the relevant information to make such trade-off decisions. And number two, there should be some way to measure how effectively the manager is making the trade-offs. In case these two conditions are not met, the units are not the natural candidates for establishment of profit centers. Boundary conditions for profit centers. Access to the market is very important with respect to profit center performance, in that the choice of market, adaptation of the product to market are necessary for maximizing revenues. Cost and revenues are separate from the rest of organization. The ability to influence them earn that profit. The prime concern of investment center is how efficiently it uses its assets. Profit centers measure the profit in absolute terms, whereas investment center measure it in terms of asset utilization efficiency. Thus, investment center acts as a special type of profit center and measures whether profits are adequate and commensurate to the assets implied. ROI as a performance measure. We have just discussed that ROI is equal to net profit divided by investment. And net profit is equal to the difference between revenues and expenses. In order to determine the ROI for an investment center, it is necessary to accurately define profits, which are revenues minus expenses, and investment base of a responsibility center. How we define profits or profitability has been just discussed. Now we discuss how do we define investment. We will use the terms capital invested and capital employed in an investment center interchangeably. Though theoretically speaking, a distinction is made between the two terms. Capital invested means all business assets available in a division or investment center. And capital employed or total assets means assets being actually used in the division. The latter figure is calculated by deducting any assets which are in excess of the requirement of an investment center or line idle, such as vacant land or machinery and equipment that has remained unused. Benefits of ROI. Advantage of using ROI. The ROI approach ensures that profits are viewed as a function of assets employed. ROI incentivizes the manager to maximize returns by controlling cost and eliminating non-value added activities. It encourages optimum investment into assets and increase revenues without additional investment. The ultimate test of profitability, as is often stated, is not the absolute amount of profit, but it is the relationship of profit to capital invested. Limitations and difficulties with ROI. Though conceptually ROI, we will discuss it in the next counseling session. That's all.